Hi, sweetheart. Hello, hello. And here we are again on another lovely Wednesday evening. All of us all together. Oh, it's so nice to see so many of you there in chat. Hello, hello. Hi, Bard. Hi, Jay. Hello, June. Hi, LJ. Arashi. Hello, my sweetheart. Thank you so much for the follow. I'm so happy to see you. I'm glad you made it. Oh, everyone, I hope you've had a great day so far. Or perhaps you're just starting out in the morning. Or maybe it's late evening for you. Or maybe even middle of the night. Oh my goodness. Oh, thank you for the hydrate, Arashi. Yes, I have my tea right here. Yeah, got a very nice black tea in my favorite green pineapple mug. After all, you know how much I love everything with pineapples on it. My goodness. It's been a very sleepy day for me today, although I managed to do quite a lot of work and everything in between. And now I'm so happy to be here with you so that we can make our way through a couple more Swiss fairy tales. You know how it is. Every Wednesday we sit down and I just read you some nice stories for 2 hours, maybe, or depending on how long my voice can go on for. Pineapple on pizza? Well, Arashi. Yes. Are you willing to accept me? Even if I eat pineapple on pizza sometimes? Only sometimes, as a treat. I have to say, I prefer pineapple chunks in chocolate pudding. I think that's a very nice dessert. On pizza, it's just fun because you know how it is on the internet. People love to have an entire discourse over something like a pizza topping. But it's all fun and games, isn't it? And it's nice to just try things out in life. So, mm, mm, I hope everyone is able to get really nice and comfy in their seats, or maybe on a nice plush couch, or perhaps lying in bed with your favorite pillow, or if you have them, an entire pile of squishmallows. I heard those are most comfy and very soft. Pineapple on pizza is very subjective. I suppose so, as are many tastes, aren't they? Whatever it is that people like is quite nice. I accept you, Mom, however you are. You know that? Aw, Arashi, you're such a sweetheart. Okay, come here, come here. Would you like to sit in Mommy's lap? I mean, there's always space. And I do give very nice head pats. Oh, and you even have such sweet little emotes. Goodness. I mean, all food is subjective, really. LJ, you're probably right. I'm not about to judge anyone for what they put in their mouth. Passes out with head on desk. Oh, Bard, Bard, my darling. I hope that you're going to have such a comfortable nap with my voice in your ear and hopefully a nice blanket around your shoulders. After the interview, definitely gonna need a lap sit. Of course, Jay. Hopefully, we'll still be here. I'm not sure. Interviews tend to be long, but if not today, then on our Cozy Friday stream. Yes, please. Oh, Arashi. Don't forget the art we'll be getting from Bean. I'll try my best to get. Oh, okay. Yeah, that's true. You did mention that. Let me know how that goes, okay? Our palates are probably the most varied individual things when it comes to our senses. That is a very interesting thought. I wonder what that's like, you know? Comparing the kind of things you like with someone. You can never quite imagine what different food may taste like to someone who's nothing like you. And I'm sure people who you find similar in terms of other interests might end up having a completely different preference when it comes to food. Hmm, that's definitely an interesting thought to have, LJ. Okay, my cables are all over the table. You can probably hear me messing around with them. Maybe I am just a little disorganized. I like hot sauce that burns your nostrils. Oh my god, Jay. That's very spicy. I don't think I can handle spicy food all that much. I'm not sure why autocorrect changed that to palates. Well, I wouldn't be able to tell the difference. Because it's just one T up and down. Hmm, it's fine. Ooh, you never really know if what you taste is the same as what other people taste. Yes, exactly, June, exactly. Right? So, for example, if I'm drinking my cup of tea, I can sort of tell what kind of honey I put into it and very subtle notes of the fragrance and the type of black tea it is. But who knows? If I were to give a cup to one of my sweethearts here, would you at all experience it in the same way that I do? Oh, that sounds like an entire, um, what's the word? Philosophical discussion. Yes. I was thinking of physiological, psychological. None of those. Well, we know that taste is greatly affected by what you're exposed to as well as your genetics. Wow, it really has a lot of unique factors, isn't it? Such amazing things that we can learn about our existence through science and research. Ah, yes, cilantro tasting like soap is the go to example. Yes, you're right. That really is heavily influenced by one's genetics. I find that quite funny. I think I'm on the side of people who find cilantro to be completely okay and just sort of vaguely herbal tasting, not soapy at all. But there is something else. Ooh, thank you for the lurk, Bard. Take care out there, okay? Okay, so you're gonna actually grab a drink. Okay, and play Genshin. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. After the interview, shoveling some snow, and then mommy's lap. That sounds like a great plan, Jay. But let's get over to our reading stream screen because look who we have with us today. Look at that. It's my tiny baby, little Pine. Super cute small sticker with the flowers. A chibi Amber, a little baby. Look at her. Look at her just sitting there with an arm full of flowers. So cute. My goodness. I just love the way that the artist made it. Yishi on Twitter. She's just vibing, yeah. You're gonna send me a plushie of you, Arashi? Alright. Oh, the plushie you is so cute. Actually, Arashi, do you think do you think I could sit you over there next to me? Would you be okay with that? I find these incredibly cute. Right. Let's Arashi plush. Let's add a little baby really quickly. You should move her so she looks like she's sitting on your lap, but I feel like I'm about to be adding even more. So we'll have a cute little collection. Look, look. That's my sweet, sweet baby Arashi right over there. Oh, look at the little baby. Oh, fit them all in the lap, but my lap is under the table. Oh, look at you. You're so cute. I feel like I'm now going to have to collect all of my little sweethearts and sit them on my reading desk. Look at how cute this is. But okay, let me just pin the usual message in chat. I'll get back to reading chat after each story, so do get comfy. June! Well, then get in here, June. You have my Discord. You can send me Bunny June PNG, right? I'll get back to reading chat after each story, right? Let me pin that for everyone listening. Yeah, there we go. So tonight, we're going to be continuing with Swiss fairy tales, and we'll see how many we get through. Hopefully, um, it's 4 or 5, like I usually do. Moogie, come on in. You're just in time. You're just in time. Look, we've got my little chibi on the desk over here, and a little arashi as well. And I'm sure my collection of cute little sweethearts is going to be growing over time. I might even need a bigger desk. Oh, I think I think my chibi self is actually falling off the desk over there because I couldn't quite see where the edge of it was. Okay. If everyone is nice and cozy and comfy, then I'm going to start with the first story for tonight. So, pay attention, my sweethearts. My voice is all you're going to be needing tonight. And I'll get back to reading your comment after every story. This one is number 9 in the collection of Swiss fairy tales, and it's called The Yodel Carillon of the Cows. And it goes something like this. They say that the soul of Belgium is the carillon. In many a tower, far up in the air hang 100 bells or more, of all sizes. They are struck by hammers, which are worked by the carillonier, who presses the keyboard as if playing the piano. Very famous are these chime masters, and sweet is the music which sounds in the air. When away from home in a foreign land, the Belgian gets homesick amid strangers, and is often downhearted because of the silences of the strange country. Should he hear the sweet chimes of a city church, a vision of the homeland with its quaint houses and high towers, its carrier pigeons and river dikes, and flower markets and happy children playing in the streets, rises before him. Then he thinks of the years of his childhood in his old home. In Switzerland, it is not the tower bells, or even the church spires sounding out the tolling for a funeral, or the merry peals of wedding bells, or the strokes calling to worship that so deeply stir the mountain man's heart, as do the yodel music and the carillon of the cows. On summer days, let one stand in the high pastures above the valleys, or on a mountain slope, and he will hear the tinkle, tinkle, tinkle of bells, bells, bells. They sound and echo from near and far. They float on the air from unseen nooks in the distance. Even the cattle enjoy the music of the bells. Just as soon as the shepherds sound the alpine horn, or start the call for the herds to come home, every goat moves forward and cow leaves their grazing on the grass, or they rise from chewing the grass. Then one may see the long lines of the milk givers marching towards the chalets. There the men, at night and in the morning, milk the cows. When the animals are housed for the night, they start the fires. They put in the rennet that curdles the cream and turns the white and golden liquid into cheese, so solid that one can roll them down the hills. Everyone in America knows about the delicious white Schweizer cheese. When cut open, it is seen to be full of holes, as if well ventilated, or, in many places, bored with an auger. So well do the cows like to wear the leather collar or neck strap and hear the tinkle of the bells that sometimes they die of homesickness when they are taken away, or they lose their sounding collar, or when among their sisters thus decorated they have none. In old days, when it was the fashion for young men to be soldiers of fortune and enlist in the armies of France, or Germany, or Italy, or Holland, a Swiss man could forget even his country unless he had a sweetheart at home. But when anyone would start the yodel song, it made him and his comrades so homesick that they wanted to leave at once for their native land. So many soldiers were found to desert on this account that the generals forbade any one ever to sing the yodel songs or play the yodel music, such as Queen Anne introduced into England. The Rans de Vache, or Song of the Cows, is more truly Switzerland's national music than is even the carillon of Belgium for the Belgians, or even that of the Swiss song, Stand Fast, O Fatherland. In this country, where the music box was invented, the yodel is centuries old. It is almost like telling a fairy tale to narrate the story of the cow parade in June, as it assembles and moves up to the high pastures called the Alps, which are spangled with flowers of gorgeous colors. From June to October, these highland meadows are rich in the sweet aromatic herbs which the cows do enjoy, especially the plant called the alpine poe. Almost as wonderful is the cow parade on its return downwards in October. During the long winter, every boy in the villages looks forward to the time, counting the last few days on his fingers, when he can go with his father and hired men, and along with the dogs and donkeys, to spend the summer in outdoor life in the highlands. Then he can be like a virtuous Indian, or a moral pirate, or an antique shepherd, and indeed, the frisky goats, though all named and numbered, will give him plenty to do. He waits patiently during the long house life of the cold time, when walled in by the winter snow, he thinks of the long bright summer days that are coming. Then he can live nearer the sky, and until the sun begins again to set earlier and the snows drive men and cattle home. The wonderful fact in the cow parade that reminds one of a fairy tale is the way these horned creatures organize of their own accord and drill. They fall into line and march as if they were playing soldiers, or were a company of real warriors, or cavalry horses going to war. Each milker knows her place, and if any young calf try to be fresh and show off too much, they get a hint from the horns of the old ladies of the herd that they had better know and keep their place. Such snubs and punishments are not forgotten. After such discipline, a young calf of a cow behaves better until grown up. Then, with more sense, she takes a hold of her place in good bovine society. The herds, when bound for the Alps, number from 20 to 200. 3 magnificent cows, brindled, dun, or white, lead the procession, and they feel their horns as fully as a lieutenant, just fresh from West Point, feels his. On the neck of each is a wide leather strap, often decorated with metal bosses or knobs, to which is hung a bell, often as big as a bucket. Most proudly, with heads up in the air, the leaders step forward. The other cows, all having names, follow, each with a smaller strap and bell on her neck. Here are a few of the names expressed in English: Star, Crow, White Stocking, Youngster, Mira, White Horn, and Lady. The boy who is on his first venture up with the herd, dressed in his best clothes, leads the flock of goats, which are put under his special charge. Each one has a name, and he knows them all. They will give him plenty to do, for they are great tramps and vagrants. Nobody knows how a goat will behave. We get our word caprice and capricious from his Latin name. Back of the columns is the big sow, with her litter of little pigs, all of them. They are glad enough to go, and they look on the whole thing as a picnic. For now, instead of living on dry winter feed, they will get the juicy grass and herbage of the summer pasture. Miss Hogg is certainly proud of her young porkers, but her music is hardly up to the carillon standard, for it consists chiefly of grunts, and this is the only language in which the education of the piggies is carried on. Feeling quite as important as any, and always wanting to hurry along and go ahead faster, is the dog Tiger. This pet of the family and the terror of the goats that gives him a butt when he gets too lively looks more like a mastiff than a collie or one of his cousins, the stately Saint Bernard dogs. Finally, as the rear guard, is the daddy of the family. He leads the horse, on which are packed and strapped the cheese cauldron for boiling the milk and cream. From his position, Daddy can round up the unruly members of the herd, cows, goats, or pigs, that have too much genius or temperament, or are too original or independent to obey rules. Just as often, in a marching army, the rear guard is the place of honor, so the last cow, usually a superb animal, carries the milking stool between her horns. The cow's parade marks a heyday for the whole village. The girls are all out and in their best dresses. Most of them will not see their brothers, their beaux, or their lovers until autumn, so they make most of the fun for the day. During the summer and until October, there are few of the male sex, except old men and small boys, left in the mountain or dairy villages. Many are the farewells and hand wavings until the procession disappears around the curve of the mountains. Then the yodel music, the Rand de Vache, the song of the Swiss, for centuries is raised and echoed among the hills. The words are, in most cases, very old, and in a sort of French that is never heard in Paris or at the universities. The notes are very much as their Swiss ancestors sung them before America was discovered. The words are, and many of the songs, quite witty. In one form or another, they are in praise of the work and craft of the cattle or dairymen. The yodel music will never die. The herds may change in breed, form, or numbers, but never the song. When heard near at hand, there is too much jingle with many discords, but distance lends enchantment to the sound. When far away, all notes melt into sweetness and accord. Once upon, once up in the regions near the sky, while the echoes coming back from the peaks make angelic sweetness and heavenly harmony, the Swiss boy has a fine time in both work and play. At no other season are the meadows more beautiful. He soon finds out, however, the difference between cows and goats. The larger animals stay on the levels, obey the rules, and are faithful, punctual, and well drilled. They always move homewards when the horn calls or the yodel music sounds. On the contrary, the goats are often obstinate and act as if the imps and elves were in them. Then, too, they love to climb and wander. It is with them a game of Johnny Jumpy Up pretty much all the time. They leap and scramble out of the meadows and up over the rocks, climbing thousands of feet towards the mountain tops and into the most difficult places, as if they love to play hide and seek and plague the shepherds. This gives the boy plenty to do in hunting them, for it is hard to hear their bells tinkling when the wind blows roughly or in the wrong direction. In autumn, when Jack Frost returns, and storms are many and frequent, and the snows heavy, The march back and down is made in good order. Then all the village folk turn out again to welcome the shepherds. As the men, cows, goats, pigs, and horses return, the latter are well loaded with cheeses. These will be sold and sent to the cities in foreign countries, and especially across the sea to America. And that is the end of the ninth story. Or was it actually the 11th? I think it might have been the 11th. I think we are quite along with these. Oh, and what's this? Do we have another little cute plushie to add to our collection? Where are you? Where did I save you? Let me try that again. Ah, in downloads, of course. I'm going to sit you down on my table. Now, let's see if I'm more successful the second time around. Oh, oh, darling, you're quite large. Let me just resize you down so you can join our little collection of sweethearts on my desk, right next to Arashi. This is so nice. I feel like I should be whispering. Well, it is a comfy reading stream, and after all, so many of my darlings might be resting or taking a nap, right? Oh, nice, sweetheart. Mm, Thank you for the stretch. I like to think that today I'm doing well in keeping a good posture so that my voice may sound sweet and breezy. Lauren, welcome in, welcome in. Happy to see you. We just finished one story and are moving on to the next one. So do get comfy as I start reading. Yeah? That's very nice. I hope you enjoyed yourself playing The Evil Within. It was quite spooky, I think. But today, in a fine evening with Mommy Amber, all we can do is be comfy and quite happy. So I hope I can see a soft smile on the faces of all of my sweethearts. And now I'll start with the next story. Number 12, The Tailor and the Giant. And it goes a little like this. All giants behave in about the same way in every country. So each one of the big bone fellows in Switzerland was like his relations in other lands. He had 2 legs, each as thick as a telegraph pole, arms like crowbars, and a body that made one think of a hogshead. His bone box, called a skull, had only a spoonful or two of brains inside of it, for his head was no bigger than a coconut. Usually he went about roaring like a bull, and carried a club in his right hand as long and thick as a young fir tree. Although he was as strong as an ox, he could hardly run as fast as an elephant, and any smart dog could move around more quickly than he. That is the reason why a nimble princess with a needle could outwit him, or any clever young fellow could trap him in a pit and then crack his skull with a pickaxe. The monstrous fellow had a stomach equal to that of a rhinoceros. At one meal he could chew up a sirloin of beef, eat a half bushel of rice, and gulp down a firkin of milk. With his club he could smash a hay wagon, but besides eating and bullying, he was not good for much. In fact, when it came to a game of hard thinking and using his 2 spoonfuls of brains, any clever boy or girl 12 years old could beat him. Some giants, of course, were more intelligent than others, but as a rule, a giant got very soon and very much tired out when he had to use his mind. They do say that the reason why giants are so stupid is because that when they were quite little babies, their skull bones closed tight too soon, so that their brains never grew any larger, while the bone became thicker and thicker. That is the reason why some people usually call the big lout Mr. Bonehead with the big club. There were other people, however, who believed that the heads of the giants were made of wood, and some always thought of the big, clumsy fellows as belonging to the tribe of wooden heads. One exception to the general run of Swiss giants was a bulky fellow named Kisher, who served the great Charlemagne when this mighty general was fighting the savages called Huns and Avars. This giant could wade all rivers no matter how deep. If his horse, which was bigger than a hippopotamus, was afraid to step in and cross over, Kisher would grab hold of his tail and pull him backwards through the deep water and over to the other shore. When fighting with his long sword in front of the Charlemagne's army, one would think, from the way he cut down the enemy and left their corpses in swathes, that he was a sort of mowing machine. After the battle, Kisher poked his spear into 8 or 10 of the carcasses of the defunct savages. Then, stringing them on his spear shaft like a pile of pretzels, who threw the loaf over his shoulders. Trudging to his general's tent, he shook off the dead savages on the ground as though he was dropping sausages from a fork. Thereupon his general rewarded him by naming him Einherr, which means that the giant was a whole army in himself. He also ordered that the big fellow should have all the sausages and barley cakes and dried apples that he wanted. In fact, it was necessary to have plenty of eatables ready for the giant, for fear lest, when very hungry, he might swallow the dishes, chew up the napkins, eat up the tablecloth, and gulp down the table, legs and all. So terrible was his appetite that the mothers, when they saw Einherr coming down the hills or up the street, called all the children inside the house, for fear lest a pretty plump girl or a nice fat boy should be seized to fill up the mammoth cave that he kept under his belt. When no food was at hand and the giant had to do without his dinner, he set up a roar like a lion until people thought it was a distant thunder echoing among the far-off mountains. Then old Kisher, for the people often forgot his new title, used to pull his belt tighter. He would even let the buckle tongue go into 2 or 3 holes further back in the strap. This took off the edge of his appetite for a while, but only for a few hours. Then he began to roar once more. Again, the mothers clasped their babies in their arms and locked the doors, for fear he might get in and eat them out of the house and home. The farmers took the harness off the horses, so that even if he broke into the stables, he would help himself only to the animals, and not devour also the traces and horse collars. But after all this, the giant never knew enough to pick a lock or get into barns when the doors were properly barred. Even a trained monkey could beat him at this sort of smartness. Now there was a young tailor who was tired of the giant's boasting. Although the people often laughed at this man of shears and measuring tape and called him 1/9, and the boys at times shouted cabbage at him, he was really a brave fellow. Besides being an expert with needle and thread, he was really as clever as anyone in town. Indeed, he thought himself in this respect equal even to the judges in the court, who put big wings on their heads to look as if theirs contained more brains than common people have. He read stories of famous heroes and dragon slayers and wanted to be like them and even excel. He boasted that, with a bag and a pair of scissors, he could get the better of any giant living. But when he declared he would someday show them the giant's carcass, they laughed and said, "That's only a tailor's promise." Yet he always retorted, "You'll see." At any rate, the tailor made up his mind that cunning could accomplish as much as force. So he studied the habits and tastes of giants to see what they liked best to eat. He soon found that this monster in human shape was very fond of rice pudding, with plenty of sauce and sugar on it. But the tailor never said a word to the giant about knowing this special weakness of his. One day, while walking on the road to the next town to take home a suit of clothes to a customer, he suddenly came upon the giant, who at this time was, as usual, very hungry. They both glared at each other, but the giant, speaking first, roared out, "Here, you fraction of a fellow, come now, let us have a trial of strength. I'll hang you on a tree if I beat you, and you can skin me alive if you win." At first, the little tailor was so frightened that his knees knocked together and his hat fell off, but quickly feeling brave again, he answered, "All right, I'm not afraid of you. Come on, we'll try." The tailor knew that a brainy fellow, with a clear head and a sharp tongue, was more than a match for the big bonehead any day. So when the giant picked up a boulder weighing a ton or so and threw it into the lake, and then dared the man to do likewise, the tailor answered, "Bah, that's nothing. Why don't you give me something that's hard to do? I can pick up the hardest pebble and squeeze water out of it with my hands. I'll wager a gold coin you can't do it." Thus dared, the giant picked up a bit of hard rock and nearly broke his finger bones trying to crush it or make it yield water. Mad as fire, he called the traitor a rascal and said he told fibs. Then he dared him to try his hand at it. He got his club ready to smash the man into jelly if he failed. Now the tailor, not expecting to get home until night, had brought a fresh cheese ball and some crackers to eat on the way. He turned his back to the giant and bent over, pretending to pick up a hard round stone from the ground. Then he pressed this cheese between his two hands so hard that a drop or two of what looked like water came out. As the moisture glistened in the sun, the astonished giant dropped his club. Then, rushing up to the tailor, he grasped his hand and cried out, "Comrade and brother you are, don't skin me, come along with me, we'll skin other people, and I'll make you rich and famous." The tailor, pretending to be as merciful as he thought himself brave, and being very ambitious, walked along with the giant until they came to a castle. The tailor wanted to get rich quickly and marry a princess, or at least an heiress. Strange to say, they found everybody inside the castle shedding tears, so that there were barely handkerchiefs enough to go around. Even the sentinel at the castle gate was weeping and had already used up 4. Secretly, the tailor wished he had brought along his whole stock of linen, for here he might have driven a good bargain and made large sales at a high profit. But he told no one his thoughts. In one breath, both the tailor and the giant asked, "What's the matter?" Then the man-at-arms told them the trouble. A dragon, living up in the mountains, in a cave had been roaring all night for food. The citizens wanted to feed the criminals then in prison to the monster, but he refused such common nourishment. In fact, he was the most particular dragon as to his diet that ever came to Switzerland. He required 1 maiden a day to appease his hunger. He never would be satisfied with boys or men or even with ladies that were either slender or bony. Now the supply of plump and beautiful girls had actually run so low that the new victims had to draw lots. This very day the lot had fallen on the king's only daughter, and at sunrise the next day she was to be swallowed up. As soon as the news had spread abroad in the city, after sunrise, the stock on hand in all the shops that kept mourning goods or black silks or muslins or grief-bordered handkerchiefs was sold out before noon, and there was not time enough to import a fresh supplies of crepes from Paris. So everybody was sighing and groaning, and the sounds were appalling. Some were shedding tears copiously for real grief, but others because their old mourning garments were out of fashion. With others it was a case of economy rather than grief, for black goods saved their best clothes. But the tailor, though feeling sad at first, saw a chance of coining wealth and getting into society, for he had quickly learned that the king had offered his daughter in marriage to anyone who would fight and kill the dragon, besides making a gift outright of 1,000 pounds of gold. So, when the pair of heroes, the tailor and the giant, offered their services, the monarch gave the monster's fellow an iron bar as big as the rail for a locomotive to run on. But when the king saw that the little tailor had only a pair of scissors, he laughed until he forgot his grief. Then he offered the little man a battle axe. It was as sharp as a razor and heavy enough to chop open a knight clothed in steel. Thus armed, the two were all ready to set out together to the dragon's cave. Pretending that one of his shoelaces had broken and he needed to tie it up, the tailor told the giant to go on and carry both axe and iron club, and he would catch up with him. When the two were together, the giant was about to hand his companion the battle axe when the tailor began at once to talk about rice pudding. He smilingly asked the giant whether he liked raisins in it and would take it with grated nutmeg sprinkled over the top, or would he have it plain? The subject was so interesting to the giant that his eyes sparkled at once. He forgot that he was carrying both of the two heavy things, axe and bar. He never dropped them until they reached the dragon's lair. But while they were arguing which should go in first, the dragon rushed out and swallowed the little tailor in one gulp without chewing him up. The giant noticed that not a bit of butter nor drop of gravy was necessary, for the tailor had slid down and disappeared in a jiffy. Thereupon the giant gave the monster a mighty wallop upon the head with the iron bar. It was so terrific that he fell dead and stiffened out 10 yards long. The giant waited to be sure he was defunct. Then, opening the monster's wide mouth, he thrust his big fist down the dragon's throat, pulled up the little tailor, and stood him on his feet. The tailor was out of breath for a moment, but quickly regaining both his wind and his wits, he took off his cap and began to rub his head. "What's the matter?" asked the giant. "Don't you feel all right?" "Why, no, you nearly dented my skull when you struck the dragon with your club. Why are you not more skillful? I can handle such monsters better than you. Can't you see that I just leapt into the dragon's mouth in order to cut his throat with my scissors?" With this he flourished his shears, which were all bloody. The stupid giant was dumbfounded, but he did not know enough to contradict the tailor, who told the big fellow to shoulder the dragon, and they would both go back to the king's court and demand the promised reward. So, with much pulling and hauling, lifting and dragging, the giant did all the work. The clumsy carcass was laid before the royal throne. The princess, looking on, wondered which one of the two heroes was to be her husband. She did not feel, just then, like marrying either of them, big or little. When, however, she thought it over, she believed that she could live on her income better with the tailor than with the giant, who was already beginning to ask when dinner would be ready. As for the king, he could not decide which was the hero, for both laid claims to the princess and to the gold. So, for the time being, the giant was fed all the beans and pork and barley and turnips he could eat, but even then, the tailor saw that the big fellow was not satisfied and would rather have rice pudding. The king and his wise men kept on debating for several days, for neither would give in. Then they became alarmed when the steward whispered in the royal ear that provisions were running low. In fact, both the larder and the cellar were nearly empty. This was on account of the giant's enormous appetite. By the following Sunday, nothing would be left except an extra hogshead of rice. The tailor overheard the steward's talk, and at once he proposed a plan by which the contest between the two claimants could be settled. Let that hogshead of rice be made into one enormous pudding. It must be well sweetened, and with plenty of raisins and powdered nutmeg on top, and then divided into two parts or piles. Whichever ate up his portion most quickly should be hailed as the hero, marry the princess, get the money, and be publicly announced by the trumpeters as the royal son-in-law and successor to the throne. Now I'll keep my promise, said the tailor to himself, as to what I could do with only a pair of scissors and a bag. So, when the boiled rice, smoking hot, was piled on trenchers and served on a long table with a small shovel beside each large wooden plate, the trial began. The giant went at his mess as if he were himself a dragon. To his astonishment, however, the tailor made the rice pudding disappear as fast as he himself could. Even after unbuckling his belt and letting out 2, then 4 holes in the leather, the tailor kept on. Finally, the giant had to stop. He rolled over on the floor and cried out, I'm beaten. Give the tailor the princess and the money, but don't let him skin me alive. All the while, the tailor, who had a pal under the table to hand him bag after bag as he dropped into them the shovelfuls of rice pudding. He filled first one big bag, strapped to his bosom, and when that was full, he put on another. The giant was so occupied with gorging himself that he did not notice anything but the rice before him. Meanwhile, the man whom the tailor had paid to do it kept on handing fresh bags to the tailor. When all of these except several towards the last were used up, he took the tailor's scissors and cut open the bags at the bottom of the pile for fear the supplies of bags might run out. Meanwhile, he filled a tub nearby. So the castle people were saved from starvation, but they all, from king to scullion, had only cold rice to eat the next day. When the tailor explained to the giant that he had an extra stomach and cut open the first one after enjoying the taste of the rice pudding, and then filled the second one, the giant, foolishly hoping still to eat more and thinking it was the proper thing to do, cut open his big stomach with a sword. But that was too much even for a giant. So, on Monday, the next day, the giant's funeral took place, and on Tuesday, the day after, the tailor married the princess, and they lived happily ever after. He had several sons and daughters, and people said his boys and girls looked like their father, on whose coat of arms was a leather wallet and a pair of scissors. And that's the end of the story. Now, that one was quite interesting. I do actually remember parts of this story from a long time ago. I'm not exactly sure where I've heard this one, but I do clearly recall that there was a story about someone squeezing a pebble, but actually making sure it was cheese. It's nice to discover it again after such a long time. Huh. Now, let's see. Oh, Jay, yes. Good luck with the interview. I hope it's all going well for you. Hmm. Oh, yes, LJ. Occasionally I will fumble over words, but that's all right. Sam, welcome in, welcome in. I'm so happy to see you. Do get comfy. We're in the middle of doing some lovely reading. We've gone through two stories so far, and I certainly have a couple more ahead of me. It's pronounced Charlemagne. Mm. Oh, yes, it reminds me of the other word that quite confused me for a long time. Colonel, right? Because that one is written as colonel. And I thought that's how you pronounce it, but no, it turns out it's colonel. And Charlemagne is pronounced Charlemagne. English. What a funny little language. Oh, Sam, I'm glad you think I read so well. After all, I do enjoy reading so much to my sweet darlings here. I hope everyone is super comfortable right now, okay? So let's carry on. Well, it is actually pronounced colonal in some languages. In some, I'm sure. I mean, there's quite a lot of languages out there. Yeah. Let me just have a little bit more tea before continuing. I do have to make sure that my voice makes it through the night. Mm, and that my posture is all well and good. And you, my darlings, I hope that wherever you are right now, you are most comfortable and that the music is soothing to your ears and that my voice is pleasant and relaxing to listen to. So, let's move on to the next story. Number 13. The Dwarf's Secret. And it goes something like this. There is one curious thing about the little brown fellows of the mountains called dwarfs that seems very funny to us. Instead of thinking of themselves as less than men, they consider themselves fully as clever as human beings. Indeed, some of them strut about, slapping their stomachs and saying, "Who wants to be a man?" Instead of rating men as greater than themselves, they are more apt to talk about human beings as slow and dull witted. The dwarves declare that they have secrets which no boys or girls or even wise men can ever find out. Most of the dwarves live in caves or down in the mines. They are very expert in using fires, forges, bellows, anvils, hammers, tongs, pincers, and the tools of blacksmiths and machinists. They often make very handsome weapons, ornaments, and things of use, such as guns, plows, swords, armor, milk pans, and cheese cauldrons. Now, there was a hunter named Walter who lived in the Alps. This man went out every day to get food for his wife and his large family of boys and girls who all had good appetites. He never shot at any creature or ever killed anything that had life out of mere sport. He was always pleasant to the dwarves also. So all these folks in the caves and mines got to like this hunter. Even the chamois that he chased knew that he was not cruel. Besides, they heard good things about him from the birds that could talk the language of goats, ibexes, and chamois. Occasionally, Walter the hunter shot a bear, and then he had a big fur robe out of which to make a bed, besides bones for all his dogs to gnaw upon. Moreover, he was looked upon by the village people as a hero, and his sons felt very proud of their father. Yet it was not so easy, as some might think, to feed his large family, for each of these youngsters seemed to have a cave growing in their stomachs, which 3 times a day apparently enlarged as mealtime drew near. Only a few potatoes and cabbages could be grown in their garden, and every wisp of hay and all the dry leaves had to be saved to keep warm in the Swiss winter, which lasted 8 or 9 months. Buttermilk and potatoes and cornmeal, boiled in goat's milk, was what was on the bill of fare for Walter's family most of the time. They were too poor to live down in the valleys or villages, where the land was all owned by well-to-do people. So the entire family, old and young, were kept busy at work every moment of daylight in summer, when the snow was off the ground. There were many things to do: to get fuel, to keep the roof from leaking, and to prepare for the awful cold from September to May. Walter's chief trouble was with his poor gun, the barrel of which was a smooth bore which could not shoot a bullet straight forward very far, so that the hunter could not be sure of hitting anything that was over 50 yards away. Sometimes Walter would spend many hours or even a whole day while out hunting and climbing over rocks and up the steep mountain sides to get even a distant shot at a chamois, only to miss his aim. Or, what was even worse, to this kind-hearted hunter, the little ball going out of its course would only wound the poor animal, so that it ran away to suffer a long time and then die in pain. In this manner, Walter very often lost a dinner for himself and his hungry children, while he grieved over inflicting pain upon innocent creatures. More than once he threw down the gun in his anger, calling it names as if it were an animal, or at the worst, a blunderbuss. Mm. Now, so many of the chamois had complained to their friends and protectors, the dwarves, about the cruelty of hunters and the sufferings of their fellows, especially the doe and fawn, that all these little people held a congress in a cave and to see what could be done. Nearly 100 dwarves attended the meeting, and both greybeards and youngsters were invited to give their opinions. All agreed that men were stupid fellows, and had to be helped out in all their needs and plans, as well as to have their wits sharpened by the dwarfs. Here is a really good and kind hunter, Walter. He's using a blunderbuss because he has nothing better. We ought to help him improve his weapon. But what can be done? We must first find out the reason why this fellow Walter and others like him inflict so many wounds upon the chamois, for we know that he is our friend and is full of pity for the animals, said a venerable old chap who seemed to be chairman of the meeting. The talk went on for hours. At last, a good-looking dwarf with a big head and very long white beard slowly arose to speak. Usually he never said a word, but listened carefully until everyone else had their say. Then, if asked, he would give his own opinion, which always proved to be the sense of the whole meeting. Everyone wondered how his head could carry all he knew, and how he could remember what each one had said. So he was generally known by one or the other of two names, which in dwarf language mean thought includer or clarifier of ideas. The chairman at once recognized him, called him by name, and bade him come up in front and speak where all could hear him. He was very modest at first, and held back a moment, but fearing that some of the other dwarfs might twist their necks off in turning them too far around to get a good look at him, and knowing that some of the old fellows were nearly deaf, he strode forward. Stepping upon a platform of rock where all could hear him easily, he began thus. The trouble with our friend Walter and with all other hunters, good and bad, especially with those who are poor shots, is that with all their good intentions, they are too stupid. They need the help of us dwarfs. Here he was interrupted by applause and cries of "Well said" and "Go on." Now he resumed, from what has been already remarked by the honorable speakers in this company, I propose 1. That we prevail upon the prettiest fairy upon the Alps to lure this man Walter up into one of our caves so far up toward the peaks that, getting very tired, he will fall asleep quickly. Then, while in slumber, one of our best soothsayers will make him dream of a gun that never misses fire or fails to deliver its bullet to the mark. Finally, that our best craftsman shall invent a new kind of weapon with improved barrel and lock. Then, when Walter wakes up, I propose he be shown how to use it. On hearing this, all the dwarfs clapped their hands, and the meeting broke up, everyone feeling sure that men needed only the brains of dwarfs to help them. Now, they declared, there would be few wounded chamois to suffer pain. The chairman then selected from the dwarfs that were passing out one handsome fellow to take the message in the most polite manner and correct language to the fairy maids. These were to choose one of their number as the Queen of Beauty to lead the hunter to the cave in which the dwarf's secret was to be revealed. To another was given the task of conjuring up the dream for the sleeping hunter. Then a committee of 4 of the cleverest dwarfs was appointed to invent the new gun and show the hunter how to use it. Now, the cave. Oh, now the cave selected, to which the prettiest of the fairies was to lead the hunter, was one just opened a few days before by an avalanche. In tumbling down the slopes, this colossal ball of snow and ice, well loaded with rocks, had struck off a part of the mountain which had bulged out. In a moment, the rocky crust was broken open. Then, as if a curtain had been lifted, a great cave, like a hole lightened with crystal chandeliers, was suddenly opened to view. As the sunbeams struck the walls, the vast space was seen to be full of topaz, glittering at 1,000 facets, like cut and polished diamonds. The lovely fairy elected to allure the hunter was told about this new cave of jewels. She was perfectly delighted with both the task given to her to do and with the jewel parlor. She met the hunter, who was struggling upwards on his way to the high peaks after chamois. She first appeared in his path and greeted him with a smile. She then led him towards the topaz cavern. Her beauty so dazzled him that, while she went ahead talking to him, he quickly forgot the miles he had traveled. Occasionally, she would sing a sweet song. Soon, she had him led into the topaz hall of the great cave, but no sooner had he crossed the threshold than he fell down exhausted upon the shining floor. In a moment he was in a deep sleep, from which he was not to awake for many days. Meanwhile, the master dwarfs were busy at the forges, making a new kind of firearm instead of leaving the barrel smooth inside. They made grooves along its whole length, which curved and twisted around, or as they said, they made it rifflin, which kept the lead ball perfectly straight on its course. When finished, a master dwarf asked the fairy to fly across the ravine and set up on the face of the cliff, 100 yards off, a flat round bit of smoky rock crystal, only as big as a thaler or a watch face. First, the dwarf loaded the gun and then, with a mallet, pounded on the ramrod to drive the lead of the bullet well into the groves. Then, taking aim, he pulled the trigger. The bullet struck the disc, knocking the pretty crystal to pieces. By this time, the hunter, asleep in the cave, began to dream, and the fairy whispered the secret in his ear. With both sight and hearing, he saw and understood all. Awaking, the hunter found his old blunderbuss gone. In its place lay the rifle, and a beauty it was, lighter to carry, more graceful in shape, and requiring less power and lead. For one who had to climb mountains, this was a great benefit. So he at once loaded his new piece so as to be ready for the first chamois he should see. He thought it would be fine fun to carry home a prize in addition to his new weapon. He had hardly stepped out of the topaz cave which seemed to close like a door behind him. Then there appeared in view 4 chamois, each full grown and with splendid horns. Putting his rifle to his shoulder and taking careful aim, though the distance was great, he fired. Instantly, there fell the finest of the animals, while the others scampered away. Retrieving his prize, Walter started down the mountain with the buck on his back. Reaching his home, his wife embraced him, and all his children gathered round him, while his dog frisked about him in delight. Then he told the whole story. The next day, he walked to the village and showed the gunsmith the rifle barrel, which he had cleaned and scoured inside until, when unscrewed from the stock, it shone like a mirror. At first, the craftsman laughed at him, but on looking down into the muzzle, as a sunbeam struck the touch hole and lighted it up along the whole length, the gunsmith opened his eyes wide in surprise. Besides a sight of it, he put his little finger in and at once discovered the secret. His eyes gleamed and his face lighted to a smile of joy. He begged the hunter to let him try the weapon. Walter gladly allowed him, for the gunmaker was an expert. At 100 yards, he knocked a hole in a plough handle. On a second shot, he cut the stem of a lone leaf remaining on a maple tree. At his success, the gunsmith fairly yelled with delight. Thenceforth, the hunter was called Mr. Walter Rifler. The gunsmith, with the happy hunter's permission, set up a sign over his shop, the picture of a disc or circle with 8 dots showing the grooves in the gun. From this time forth, he could not make rifles enough to supply the chamois hunters. Each man wanted the new weapon. There was rejoicing even among the dumb animals, for the dwarfs told them what had happened and why it was that none of their numbers suffered pain any more or died in agony from the hunter's missing fire. So a new joy came into the life of Walter the hunter. After this, he could always get enough meat to supply his family's need. From the skins and furs, the horns and the heads, stuffed and mounted, with bright eyes made of glass, and sold in the village shops and hotels, and to visitors, he had plenty of pocket money. For his wife, he bought a tortoise-shell comb, besides a linen and lace cap, and silver chains for her bodice. To each of his daughters, he gave enough spending money for them to save up sufficient to buy all the pretty things they needed, and also to lay in store of linen for their dowry. His sons, trained early to the use of the rifle, won prizes at the shooting matches, which now grew to be so popular as to become in time a national institution. This enabled the Swiss people to fear none of the despotic rulers of Europe who hated republics. When one proud visiting emperor asked one of Walter's sons, who was a dead shot, what the Swiss in little Switzerland would do if an army corps from Germany were to invade their land, he answered, "We should, each of us, shoot twice, your majesty," answered the brave boy. All the other hunters were happy, too, for chamois meat was plentiful in every chalet. Nevertheless, so many of the herds were, in time, so depleted that the total number in the mountains so lessened that laws were passed forbidding any hunter, young or old, and no matter how famous, from shooting more than 100 during his lifetime. Yet, even then, there was plenty of meat for all, and very much more than in the old days. All the world rejoiced also, for now, armed with the rifle, the wild beasts, even lions, tigers, and grizzly bears, that had so long destroyed millions of human beings, were no longer able to drive men away. Even women hunters dared to go into the jungle and face the terrible creatures. In time, the rifle was made lighter to carry, prettier to look at, and easier to charge. Men discovered that the old way of loading was at the wrong end and used the breech instead of the muzzle to put in the cartridges. So the heavy mallet and ramrod were left behind and forgotten, and wars became shorter and less dreadful. And that's the end of the story. Hmm. I hope you enjoyed that one, my darlings. It was a rather interesting one, having the dwarves craft such a fine weapon, mainly to lesser the suffering of animals being hunted. I suppose that is understandable. And then what became of it, I wonder? More guns for war. But such is the nature of things, as we all know. Oh, thank you, Bard, for taking care of our chat, getting rid of those pesky bots. Sometimes they come in, but if anything, you are my personal sniper. I can always trust your good aim. Oh, welcome back, Jay. You have a job opportunity soon. That's very good. The people were thoughtful, understandable, and wanted to make sure I felt that I had an opportunity in the near future. Oh, that is very good to hear, Jay. I'm very glad. That's wonderful. Hmm. Oh, my darlings. I hope you're having a pleasant evening here with me. I think we're getting through these quite quickly. After all, I myself am very interested in what every story has to say. But let me have another sip of my tea first. Hmm, lovely. Hmm. The next one is number 14, The Fairy of the Edelweiss. It's the name of that particular Swiss flower, isn't it? Oh, Jay, thank you very much. I'm glad to hear you speak gracefully as you read. I try. After all, if I have a soft voice, then what else should I use it for than to read it to my sweethearts? I do enjoy a good story time myself. So, let's continue on. The Fairy of the Edelweiss. And the story goes a little like this. Every child in Switzerland has heard of the Golden Age long, long, long ago, when no ice or snow covered the mountains. Then grass grew and flowers bloomed clear up on the highest summits, those barren and rocky heights, such as we see now, where nothing can live but the big horned woolly ibex, were unknown, for they were clothed with forests. One could walk all the way up to the peak's top, amid beautiful trees, lovely shrubs, and blossoming plants, and sweet smelling herbs. Summer then reigned for at least 10 months in the year. The cows grazed on the delicious grass that makes the breath of kine so sweet. Where now are only masses of snow and ice, rivers called glaciers, were flowery meadows full of birds and bright dragonflies, and musical with bees, crickets, and singing insects. Then the cows were so big and fat that they gave their milk that was rich in cream 3 times a day. Pastures were everywhere, and nobody went hungry, for food was as cheap as leaves or pebbles. The old people still tell us that during this period, all that one had to do was to ladle out the milk from tanks so large as ponds, or pick big red cherries by putting out your hands. Then the fairies were happy. On every moonlit night, they held dancing parties in the meadows. But by and by, the terrible frost giants that live up around the North Pole heard of this land of 1,000 mountains, where the chief rivers of Europe were born and still have their cradles. Then these greedy fellows that in winter tie up all things fast or freeze them solid, except for a few hours on warm days when the sun is shining, said one to the other, "Come on, fellows, let us go down and conquer this mountain country that is so rich in honey and cream and flowers. We shall pile up the snowflakes leagues high and freeze solid the falling snow and cold water. We shall turn these into sheets of ice that will cover the land thousands of yards thick and kill all living things. We shall drive off all the flowers, blow the grass away, and chill the noses of the cows so that they cannot graze. That will prevent men from having houses and milk churns and stores of cheeses. We must drive off the hens too, so that people can have no eggs. If the sun tries to stop our work, we'll laugh at him, so we will." Thus spoke the Frost King, while the mists rolled out in clouds from his mouth as he boasted of what he could do. "Yes, yes, indeed we shall," cried all the frost giants, and a shower of snowflakes and ice particles filled the air, for even their icy breath turned solid and was deadly to all plants. When the north wind blew down the news to the Swiss fairies, there was much sadness and even terror. Where could the fairies dance when the meadows were gone and the flowers dead? How could they float in the air clad only in gauzy garments? How could they see each other if mist and storm and darkness filled the air and ice covered the ground? And how could they live without the blossoms? One fairy actually wept tears in sympathy for the poor cows that were certain to starve. And as for the children whom the fairies loved, where could they play if there were no fields to play in, or roses or violets to pick? One bold fairy looked defiance and spoke out loud in the meeting. I'm not afraid of these frost giants from the North Pole. They are nothing but big, boasting bullies. Let our fairy queen change me into a flower and clothe me warm enough, and I'll defy even the Frost King to hurt me. Bravo, bravo, cried all the fairies in chorus. But how could you stay all the time up there, with no living thing near you and all alone? You will have no neighbors except the rocks and crags, and even they will be all bare and swept by the fierce winds. Can you stand that? Asked an old fairy doubtingly. Yes, if for nothing else than to show that we fairies are not afraid of the frost giants. I should be willing to live alone. Besides, our fairy queen will see that, by and by, there will be others like me, and then I shall have company. The more of us, the merrier, I am sure. In a few thousand years, we'll make an army, and a victorious one too. Seeing this brave one of her company, so ready and willing, the queen of the fairies put on her thinking cap. She spent the whole night in planning how to turn this volunteer fairy into a flower. Then she would bundle up this little thing in furs and dress her so warmly that even the biggest and coldest of the frost giants could not kill her with his icy breath. And this was the way this volunteer from the fairy ranks was clothed and made ready to fight in the long war with cold and storm, so that for ages this little thing has been able to live far up on the mountain heights and all the time to smile and be joyful and laugh in the face of the frost giants. In fact, so happy is she among the rock crags and sunshiny crannies, and so amused at herself in looking down over the terrible precipices to the rocks thousands of feet below, that she would not exchange places or climates with even the cloves and nutmegs. No, not even with the tea roses and coffee blossoms in the spice islands of the southern seas. Now it is customary in all happy families, when father and mother are expecting the cradle soon to be filled, to choose a name for the baby and to have its clothes ready. This is done so that the poor little thing, on coming into the world, will not get a chill or sneeze or have a cough and die. Moreover, if it have a name, no one will mistake one baby for another unless they arrive as twins, when some mark, such as a blue ribbon or a pink one, is necessary. So the old fairies put their heads together to find a proper name for the new fairy flower baby that was to live among the cold mountain tops and refuse to be frightened or frozen or be driven down lower or to be cuddled up in meadows near men's houses where it was warm. What say you, asked the queen, of the wisest of the fairies, who was considered a sort of sage or prophet, and who had a wonderfully long head? What name do you give? With a loud voice, almost like a roar, this fairy, that wore clothes of color of an old man's beard, called out, Anaphylis margarita. At this, every fairy looked at each other, as if to say, what a mouthful! How strange a name! Or, so big for a little fairy! Or, why does she talk Latin? There were questions in their eyes also, but none asked, what does the name mean? For all fairies are very shy about confessing ignorance. But the fairy queen, who knew almost everything, put a look of great dignity and discreetly inquired of the sage if her everyday talk was in Latin. She did not mean to be sarcastic, however. Why would you call me by the pearly lion's foot if I were to volunteer? Asked a bright young fairy. For two reasons, your majesty, answered the old oracle, addressing not the young volunteer, but the queen, as was proper. First, to reward valor and virtue by giving an august name, and second, to let the frost giants, the insolent fellows from the North Pole, know that when even one of us fairies puts her foot down, it is like a lion's roar. No one can move or lift or push or drive it away. We thrust forward this fairy flower as our banner to say to the enemy, we shall not surrender, and we defy you. The fairy queen, full of admiration, replied, we bow to your wisdom, and so it shall be written in our books. Nevertheless, both mortals and fairies must also have a short name for everyday use. How about the second, or personal part, Margarita? As you will, your highness, but may I suggest even a better term? In the speech of the mortals in this mountain land, they will love anything that you may clothe and adorn, I am sure. After this ending of her speech, the wise old fairy curtsied most politely. The fairy queen looked very lovely, as thus flattered by the fine tact and the charming speech of this oldest member of the family, and besides, as she loved the brave Swiss nation, she said, you are always wise, so please let me have a name that will be popular with the Swiss people. Well, your highness, if it be your pleasure, we shall clothe your pet in purest white, like ermine, rivaling even the snow without spot or stain or any dark tint. So we may justly call it the Edelweiss, that is, the noble white. At this, all the fairies shouted with delight. Even the queen herself smiled, and then made answer. You have all spoken, Edelweiss, it shall be. Now that the name was ready, the queen called for the attendant maids of the brave fairy volunteer, and then and there the custom was began, which mortals always afterwards followed, of roping a princess who was to marry a husband in a foreign country. She must drop off all her former clothing, even to her glistening skin. Then, entering another room in the new land, she must clothe herself in the garments that are fashionable in her new home. As in the case, for example, of the Belgian lady who long afterwards came as a bride to the castle of the Hawk in the land of the Swiss. Stripped of all her pretty gauzy skirts, bodice, and standing forth as nude as a baby in the bathtub, the queen bade her brave fairy look at her new wardrobe, which lay piled up and as white as any snowdrift. Then, before all the fairies, the queen put this question. Are you willing to leave the company of your fellows in fairyland and be a flower to remain rooted in the rocks and amid the cold forever? Yes, truly, with all my heart, answered the brave one. And will you cast seed every year and multiply your family that will bear your noble name? Surely, for the more of us there are, and the more we can resist the cruel enemy, the frost giants, and make mortals glad, the happier we shall be. You have spoken wisely, said the queen. We shall clothe you very thickly in white robes that look like flannel, but that are even warmer, so no giant can hurt you when he bites with frost, no snowstorm chill you, or ice choke you, or north wind make you shiver. We shall give you roots that dig their way down deep in the crannies, and that will nourish your life. Besides, we have searched the world over, and whatever of hair or fur or Arctic animals or wool of sheep or down of birds can show or suggest to us, we have used to weave a garment so warm that the biggest of the giants, with the iciest breath and a beard of icicles, cannot even give you a chill. With your long hair and woolly coat and roots that resist frost bites, you can tickle his nose when he comes too near and even laugh in his face. Indeed, I will, answered the fairy defiantly. And will you do even more? Will you keep your eye on the cracks and crevices that hold the sun's warmth so that your children can creep up higher every year? Asked the queen. The sun in the heaven helping me, I will, replied this fairy of the vanguard, as some of her sisters already spoke of her. Then the queen lifted her wand tipped with a star. She touched the forehead of the fairy of the lion's foot, which was her war name, while in the talk of mortals she was called Noble White, though still the fairies quite often used the name Margarita. Then they stood Fairy Edelweiss on a pile of rocks, filled in with sand and earth, to show the others where and how, in the new world, Edelweiss was to live and grow and enlarge her kingdom. It was a strange and wonderful transformation, as the fairy's pretty feet turned into rootlets that quickly thrust themselves deep downwards, gripping the rock rough and drinking in the moisture of the soil. Grandly the Edelweiss showed her pride in belonging to the great family which a famous man first named after the little frogs, because they loved damp and soft places. Yet all this was beneath. Above, there first rose a stalk, a few inches high, until it reached half a foot. Then the arms multiplied and stretched out. They were densely covered, like sleeves of overcoats, with thick coverings, each resembling white flannel or velvet, as warm as the fur of an ermine. Looks as if she had on an ulster, said one of the merry fairies, some of whom thought she looked too sweet for any use. And yet, so far, there was no real flower, but only a defense like armor against those worst enemies of a plant, cold and frost. Now for beauty and for glory, said the queen. Out of and on top, the dense star-like mass of warmth and coziness, as if robed for a skiing or skating party, there blossom forth many round-headed tufts or rosettes that were pearly white. Now, not only thickly clothed, but beautiful and strong, the noble white was given a home at once in a rocky cranny. like a newborn baby that, as soon as it arrives, sticks its thumb in its mouth as much as to say, "This world is all right. I am going to like it." The Edelweiss rooted itself at once and began to grow. Years passed by, and the lovely white flower, flourishing where only the chamois and the ibex among animals lived, where the red alpine rose could bloom, multiplied. Like a brave army, it moved steadily forward, occupying every crevice, cranny, and hollow. These the hardy plants held like forts against all cold corners. Yes, even resisting the avalanches that tried to crush these little strangers. In a few hundred years, thousands of the noble white plants dotted or made beautiful the bare rocks, or hung over the precipices. In vain did the icy breath of polar winds, or the blasts of the rude French frost giants, or even the hurtling avalanches, drive the Edelweiss away. Nor was the hot south wind, the fern, able to wither it. Swiss maidens made their flower the emblem of their own purity and also of the tenacity of faithful lovers. At the wrestling and shooting matches, the young men wore its flower in their hats or twisted them among the ropes which marked off the boundaries of their games and wrestling bouts. To heroes, it was the symbol of perseverance, endurance, and that quiet force which compels victory. Patriots so loved it because of its resisting power, the spirit of advance instead of retreat, that they would gladly make it the national flower. Switzerland, the Edelweiss among nations, has held its own for ages, maintaining her life and independence despite the alien power of invaders and tyrants, and the Swiss still sing their national hymn, "Stand fast, O Fatherland." So also the Edelweiss, the noble white, remains forever as the Swiss emblem of their republic and of its beauty and permanence. To destroy this flower, the frost giants make their continual assaults in vain. Just as mighty monarchs have tried again and again to overwhelm, as with avalanche of invasion, the freedom of the Swiss, and have always failed, so the Edelweiss never yields. Its white banner hangs forever on the heights. To every person, it is, as a living motto, bearing amid snow and ice, the message of Excelsior, higher yet, and onward ever. And that is the end of the story. Hmm. Oh, my sweethearts, I think we've had quite a lovely time today. Wouldn't you say? I know I certainly did enjoy myself. Oh, thank you so much for the follow, Dead Code. Welcome, welcome. I think, my darlings, that was the last story for today. We've gone on for a pleasant 2 hours, and I hope that all of you enjoyed yourselves listening to me reading. I know I certainly had such a lovely time. I hope that me being here has made your day somewhat brighter, a little more enjoyable, and perhaps brought some gentleness into your life. After all, that's what these Wednesday reading streams are for, And of course, next Wednesday, we're going to have another one. I certainly look forward to even more. Now, perhaps some of you might have fallen asleep or have decided to lay down and enjoy a little nap or maybe a soft rest. And that's very lovely. So, my darlings, I'm going to end our stream here. So, make sure you get plenty of rest, that you take care of yourselves and one another. And remember, my sweethearts, my eternal light will be with you always.